Just moments from saying, "I do," she found her elderly golden retriever standing in her way, silent, unmoving. Whispers urged her forward, but the truth behind his stance shattered her heart. The morning sun cast a golden haze over Charleston, South Carolina, its rays warming the cobbled streets and brick-lined alleys of the historic district. A gentle coastal breeze stirred the Spanish moss hanging from ancient oaks, while the faint scent of magnolia blossoms floated through the spring air. It was the kind of day brides dreamed of: soft, light, clear skies and the promise of a forever love just hours away. Inside, a pale blue two-story home on King Street, nestled between a row of old townhouses, Emily Carson stood barefoot in front of her bedroom mirror. The vintage glass shimmered with her reflection. A tall, slender woman in her early 30s, with light freckles dusting her fair cheeks and strawberry blonde hair coiled into a loose chignon. Her pale green eyes, usually calm and warm, now flickered with both excitement and something quieter, perhaps apprehension. Emily was known for her kind nature, the way she spoke gently to children and animals alike, the patience she showed even on the most chaotic days. She taught third grade at Harbor View Elementary, where she was beloved not only by students but also by their parents. But beneath her gentle exterior was a woman shaped by loss. The death of her mother 5 years ago had carved a hollow into her heart, one she had slowly filled with love, teaching, and the loyal companion lying at her feet. Bailey, her 11-year-old golden retriever, rested his head on his large, honey-colored paws, his dark eyes tracking her every movement with quiet intensity. Time had streaked his muzzle with gray, and his once boundless energy had softened into a dignified calm. Bailey was no ordinary dog. Emily had adopted him just weeks after her mother's funeral, walking into the Charleston Humane Society, with tears still drying on her cheeks. Bailey had chosen her, then pressing his head into her leg with a quiet kind of knowing, as if offering comfort before she'd even asked for it. Since then, he had been her shadow, her steady rhythm in a world that often shifted too fast. "You think Jack's ready for this?" she asked with a smile, kneeling beside him. Bailey didn't move, didn't wag his tail, just blinked slowly, as if he understood the gravity of the day. Emily's brow furrowed. Normally, any mention of Jack would have Bailey up and pacing in excitement. Jack Monroe, her fiancé, was a civil engineer with a fondness for flannel shirts and black coffee, and a deeply rooted sense of loyalty that mirrored Bailey's. He and Bailey had taken to each other immediately, and Emily often joked that she was just the bridge between two soulmates. From the doorway, a voice called out, "You've got 10 minutes before chaos begins." It was Rachel, Emily's younger sister, who had arrived 2 nights ago after a 5-year absence in Chicago. Rachel was shorter than Emily, with dark auburn curls that framed her heart-shaped face and sharp, observant eyes. There was a guardedness about her now, a brittleness beneath her casual tone that hadn't always been there. Once inseparable as children, the sisters had drifted after their mother's death, and Rachel's sudden move north had driven a deeper wedge. She'd returned now under the pretense of celebration, but Emily knew something was off. Rachel leaned against the door frame, arms crossed over a faded Ramones t-shirt she'd refused to give up since college. She glanced at Bailey. "He's not his usual self, huh?" Emily shook her head. "I thought maybe it was the heat or just old age. But he's different." Rachel walked over and crouched down beside Bailey, her fingers brushing through his thick fur. "He feels warm, and kind of stiff. Has he been eating? Emily hesitated. Not really. And he barely touched the treat Jack gave him last night. They both looked at the dog, who closed his eyes and sighed deeply. I could take him to the vet if you want, Rachel offered. It was unexpected, an olive branch perhaps. Emily gave her a searching look. No, not today. I mean, maybe later, if he doesn't perk up. But it's the wedding, and there's already so much going on. Rachel nodded, standing up. Just say the word. The tension between them hovered for a moment before Rachel disappeared back down the hallway. Emily returned to the mirror, brushing a loose strand from her cheek, trying to shake the weight that had settled in her chest. It was her wedding day. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. And yet, something felt off. Downstairs, the hum of activity began to rise. The clink of coffee mugs, the murmur of voices, the laugh of a bridesmaid recalling a college story. The stylist team would be arriving any minute. Her mother's best friend, Diane, a sharp-tongued but warm woman in her 60s, was already setting out breakfast pastries with the same efficiency she had once used to manage church fundraisers. Bailey slowly got up, joints clicking, as he stretched and followed Emily as she descended the stairs. He stayed close, brushing against her leg as if needing contact. Emily's best friend and maid of honor, Savannah Blake, arrived soon after. A lively woman with a southern drawl and a closet full of heels she couldn't walk in Savannah, was all sparkle and energy. She enveloped Emily in a perfumed hug, then crouched down to greet Bailey. "Hey, old man," she said softly, scratching under his chin. "You ready to see Mama get hitched?" Bailey didn't react, not even a tail thump. Savannah stood slowly. "He's not right, Em." "I know," Emily whispered. The rest of the morning blurred curlers, makeup, brushes, soft chatter, and laughter mixed with the smell of hairspray. Yet through it all, Emily felt like she was watching from a distance, her mind drifting back to Bailey's eyes. Those eyes that had watched over her in silence for years, now clouded by something unreadable. By late morning, the house was buzzing with preparations. The florist arrived with cascading arrangements of white roses and baby's breath. Jack's sister brought over the ring box. The photographer began setting up in the backyard to capture the getting ready moments. And Bailey, ever faithful, lay beneath the dining room table, ignoring the noise and commotion. Emily sat quietly by the window, sipping tea, her dress hanging from the armoire. Outside, the sun filtered through the palmetto trees, casting lace-like shadows on the garden stones. It should have felt like magic, but it didn't. She reached for Bailey again, resting her hand gently on his back. "You're scaring me, buddy," she whispered. "Don't do that. Not today." Bailey lifted his head and leaned into her touch, eyes half-lidded. He didn't need words. He never had. And in that moment, as soft music played upstairs and voices laughed in the hallway, Emily Carson understood something that chilled her. Bailey wasn't just tired. He was trying to tell her something. The late morning light spilled through the gauzy curtains of Emily's bedroom, casting soft, shifting patterns on the polished wooden floor. The faint hum of voices from downstairs filtered upward. Bridesmaids comparing makeup brushes, the clink of coffee cups, and the occasional rustle of a garment bag. But inside the quiet sanctuary of the room, it was as if time had slowed to a crawl. Emily stood in her lace wedding dress, the intricate embroidery catching the sunlight like frost on window panes. She turned carefully in the full-length mirror, adjusting the neckline ever so slightly. but her eyes kept drifting downward to the lump of gold fur sprawled across the carpet near the door. Bailey wasn't sleeping. He was watching her. His body pressed low to the floor, head resting on his paws, those dark amber eyes never leaving her. Emily frowned. Normally, Bailey would be pacing in excitement, tail thumping with every visitor, sniffing makeup brushes, and trying to nuzzle the bridesmaids. Today, he hadn't moved in nearly an hour. The dress fit perfectly. That should have been a relief after 3 fittings and countless alterations. But Emily barely noticed. She set her hands gently over her stomach, breathing in deep, trying to center herself. "You're being silly," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to herself or to Bailey. But the worry in her chest had grown steadily curling tighter with every moment he didn't wag his tail. A soft knock came at the door before it creaked open. Rachel stepped in, balancing a small tray with toast and tea. She had exchanged the band tee for a loose pastel blouse and jeans, her dark curls still damp from a shower, her face makeup-free but peaceful. Her relationship with Emily had always been marked by fire and tenderness in equal measure. Rachel had the sharper tongue, the quicker temper. But she was also fiercely loyal, and her return to Charleston after 5 years had stirred something inside them. Both old memories shared, laughter and silences that didn't feel so comfortable anymore. "I brought you breakfast, though I doubt you'll eat it," Rachel said, setting the tray on the vanity. She knelt beside Bailey, running her hand over his fur. "He's still warm. He hasn't moved," Emily said quietly. "Even when Savannah came in." Rachel tilted her head. "Has he eaten anything today?" "Half a slice of turkey." "That's it." Emily bit her lip. "I thought it was the noise, the people. But I don't know. He feels off." Rachel shifted to sit cross-legged on the rug beside Bailey, leaning her back against the door. "You remember when we got cinnamon?" she asked suddenly. Emily turned surprised. "Of course. I was 8. You were 5. She ate Dad's slippers the first day. Mom let her sleep in the laundry basket by the fireplace. She said no dog would sleep outside under her roof." They both laughed softly, and Bailey gave the faintest wag of his tail. Rachel looked up at Emily, her voice softer now. "When Cinnamon died, you didn't come out of your room for 2 days. Mom finally bribed you with cookie dough." "I thought my heart would break in half," Emily said, her throat tightening. "And now this guy." She looked at Bailey, her voice trailing off. Rachel nodded. "He was there when Mom died, when you moved out. He's more than just a dog." Bailey suddenly shifted slowly, pushing himself to stand. Emily took a half step back to make room, watching carefully. His legs trembled as he rose, but he didn't stumble. He walked to the bedroom door and stood in front of it, blocking the way, his gaze fixed directly on Emily. "Bailey," she whispered. He didn't move. His body was tense, his breathing audible. Rachel stood too, exchanging a glance with her sister. "That's strange." Emily stepped closer, reaching out her hand, but Bailey didn't back away or wag his tail. He simply stood there as if saying no. The moment stretched out until Savannah's voice echoed from the bottom of the stairs. "M, the photographer's ready." Rachel opened the door slowly, careful not to push Bailey. He didn't resist her, but as soon as Emily tried to step forward, he shifted again, placing his body in front of her knees. Rachel whistled low. That's not him being cute. That's him trying to say something. Emily stared at Bailey, heart pounding now, not with excitement, but with dread. She crouched slowly, ignoring the tug of her dress. Bailey, what is it? He leaned his body gently against her legs, pressing close as if anchoring her in place. He's trying to keep you from going, Rachel said softly. I don't know why, but he knows something. The memory surged then. Unbidden Emily, 5 years ago, sitting on the porch steps in a storm, soaked to the bone the day of their mother's funeral. Everyone had been inside, voices, hushed hands ringing. But Bailey had come out, laid his head on her lap, and stayed until the rain stopped. He'd known then, just like now. Emily looked at Rachel. Can you stay with him a minute? Rachel nodded. Emily walked out slowly, descending the stairs in a fog. The house was humming with laughter flowers, arriving people flitting past. But she couldn't shake the feeling Bailey had planted inside her chest. Something wasn't right. Downstairs, Diane, her mother's friend, an unofficial aunt figure, was setting trays of mimosas by the entry table. A tall, round woman. With a no-nonsense attitude, Diane had helped raise Emily and Rachel when their mother worked night shifts. She gave Emily a once-over. You look beautiful, honey, like your mother on her wedding day. Emily nodded mutely. Diane stepped closer. What's wrong? It's Bailey. He's acting strange. Diane frowned. Old dogs know things. Trust him. Emily blinked. What, I've seen it before. My collie. Maddie. 3 days before my husband's stroke, she wouldn't leave his side. They feel things. You trust that boy. Emily swallowed hard. I think I do. She glanced toward the stairs, heart now racing for reasons that had nothing to do with flowers or dresses. Something was happening. Something she didn't understand yet, but Bailey did. The Charleston sky had turned a brilliant shade of blue by early afternoon, cloudless and wide, stretching endlessly above the old city. St. John's Episcopal Church, a stately structure with weathered stone and climbing ivy, stood bathed in light as the wedding party arrived. The scent of salt water from the nearby harbor mingled with the floral arrangements lined along the steps, white peonies and eucalyptus garlands swaying softly in the breeze. Guests dressed in pastel linens and seersucker suits began filtering toward the arched entrance, some pausing to take photos under the grand oaks that flanked the property. Emily stepped out of the lead car, her lace gown gently gathered in her hands. Her skin, usually fair and calm, flushed slightly from the heat, and her cheeks carried the faint trace of worry more than blush. She had barely spoken during the short drive, her hand resting protectively on Bailey's thick golden fur as he lay stretched on the back seat, head on her lap. The car had been quiet except for his slow breathing, and Emily had clutched the hem of her dress, not from nerves, but from an unshakable sense of dread. Bailey had once loved car rides, tail-thumping tongue, lolling head out the window to greet the world. But today, he had simply lain there, unmoving, eyes closed, except for the occasional glance upward at her face. As the driver, a tall, clean-cut man in his 50s named Martin, who had driven for the Carsons for years, opened the door, Bailey stirred, but didn't leap out as expected. Instead, he stepped carefully onto the pavement, his paws trembling just slightly, then paused at Emily's side. "You okay, sweet boy?" she whispered, kneeling carefully. Bailey leaned into her, then moved slowly ahead. Emily called Savannah from the church steps. "We're right on schedule. Let's get a few more photos before the ceremony." Emily nodded absently. The photographer, a lean man named Victor Morales with a shaved head, heavy camera gear strapped across his chest, waved her toward the garden to the left of the chapel. Victor was known for his candid wedding shots. He captured moments rather than poses, often crouching in unexpected angles to preserve raw emotion. As Emily turned to follow Bailey, suddenly stopped. In front of the stone path leading to the church entrance, he stood still, then slowly, deliberately laid down. Right in the middle of the walkway. Bailey. Emily stepped closer. "Come on, buddy." He didn't move. His body, low head down his breath, now visibly labored, nostrils flaring just slightly. Victor lowered his camera. "Do you want him out of the shot?" "No," Emily said, her voice tighter than she intended. He's not trying to be in the photo." Savannah approached, heels clicking on the path. "What's wrong with him?" "He okay." Emily knelt beside Bailey again. Up close, she could see the fine tremor running through his legs and the dampness around his muzzle. His breathing was shallow now, chest rising with more effort. "Something's wrong," Emily whispered. Rachel appeared behind her, holding the train of the dress with both hands. "What is it?" "He won't move. He's trying to stop me from going in." Behind them, a voice called out with strained cheer. "Sweetheart, we need to move this along. Guests are getting settled." It was Diane fussing with the boutonniere of an usher. Emily shook her head. "I can't. Not like this." Savannah sighed. It's probably just nerves. He senses your stress." But Emily wasn't listening anymore. She looked down into Bailey's eyes, those familiar eyes that had once stared up at her through tears after her mother's funeral, that had greeted her after every hard day of teaching, that had rested beside her bed through heartbreaks and flu seasons and long nights filled with uncertainty. And now, those eyes were dull pleading. "Rachel," she said, "can you call Dr. Tilly? Tell them I'm bringing him in. Tell them it's urgent." Rachel nodded, already digging into her purse. From the crowd gathered near the church steps, an older couple began to approach. They walked arm in arm, a graceful pair in their 70s. The man Harold was tall and wiry, with thick white hair neatly combed back. His wife Lillian had the gentle roundness of someone who had raised many children and laughed through much of it. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat, and her eyes crinkled as she looked at Bailey. "I hope you don't mind," Lillian said softly. "We noticed something was wrong." "That's a good dog you have there." Harold nodded. "Reminds me of our Sammy, Labrador mix. He laid in front of our son's college dorm room the day before his first big exam. Wouldn't budge. We thought he was just being stubborn. But turned out our boy had an arrhythmia. Passed out the next morning. That dog saved him." Emily blinked, overcome. "You think he's trying to tell me something I know he is," Lillian said, touching her arm. "Trust him." Emily rose her veil, shifting slightly with the breeze. She turned to Rachel. "Let's go." Savannah opened her mouth, then shut it again. Victor, to his credit, didn't question. He simply lifted his camera and quietly snapped a shot as Emily lifted her dress, and Bailey, somehow understanding, struggled to stand and follow. Rachel had already texted Jack. He was at the church hall finishing preparations with his brother Caleb Monroe, a broad-shouldered, light-hearted man in his early 30s, with an easy grin and a fondness for dad jokes. Jack read the message, then immediately dialed back. Emily answered on speaker in the back seat as Rachel drove. Her voice trembled. "Jack, you're doing the right thing," he said without hesitation. "I'll hold things here. Let me know what the vet says. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." Emily closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. Don't be. He's family." The air inside the Charleston Veterinary Center was cool and sterile, a sharp contrast to the humid spring warmth outside. The lobby smelled faintly of antiseptic and dog shampoo, and soft instrumental music played through ceiling speakers. Emily sat in one of the faux leather chairs, her wedding dress billowing around her like a cloud, her hands resting on Bailey's back as he lay across the floor beside her feet. The receptionist, a young woman with bright red curls and freckles named Tasha, had taken one glance at Bailey's labored breathing and waved them past the line of waiting pet owners with a sympathetic nod. Rachel hovered nearby, arms crossed, pacing in short, nervous strides. Though typically composed, she had turned quiet and serious during the drive over, her eyes fixed on the road, lips pressed into a thin line. Now she occasionally glanced at her phone, but never wandered far from her sister and the golden dog who had once chewed the laces off her boots in high school. Bailey's breathing had not improved. He lay quietly, his side rising and falling with visible effort, tongue resting on the floor. Emily's hand never left his fur fingers, tracing old scars and familiar ridges. Her makeup had long since smudged beneath her eyes, mascara pooling in the corners, but she didn't care. Everything else, the flowers, the music, the aisle she dreamed of walking, had faded away in the shadow of her worry. The door at the end of the hallway opened, and a tall woman in dark green scrubs entered. Her graying hair was pulled into a practical braid, and a name badge read Dr. Madeline Tilley. She was in her late 50s with kind brown eyes framed by lines that spoke of decades spent in compassion and grief alike. She knelt beside Bailey without a word and pressed her stethoscope gently against his chest. "Hi, Bailey," she murmured. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Emily cleared her throat. He stopped walking. "Wouldn't let me go inside the church. And then I saw he was breathing strangely. He's been lethargic for a few days, eating less." Dr. Tilley nodded slowly, listening again, then looked up. "Let's get him into the exam room. I'd like to do a quick ultrasound and run a couple of tests." Rachel helped lift Bailey gently onto the rolling gurney, her fingers trembling only slightly as she adjusted his back legs. They moved down the corridor, Emily trailing close behind the hem of her dress, catching on the wheels of the gurney. The exam room was small, but clean, with posters of canine anatomy on the walls and a cabinet of dog treats untouched today. Dr. Tilley worked efficiently, her hand steady as she attached sensors, drew blood, and performed the echocardiogram. Emily stood nearby, Rachel offering quiet support from the corner eyes flicking between the monitor and her sister's pale face. As the vet stepped away from the machine, the silence was heavy with expectation. "Emily," she said gently, "Bailey's heart is enlarged. His breathing is labored because fluid is starting to build around his lungs. He's showing signs of early-stage congestive heart failure." The words fell like stones. "But he was fine a week ago," Emily whispered. "These conditions can progress rapidly, especially in senior dogs," Dr. Tilley said. "Golden retrievers are prone to cardiac issues, and at 11, Bailey's already a little beyond the average lifespan for his breed. Rachel moved closer, placing a hand on Emily's back. "Is there a treatment?" Emily asked. "Yes," Dr. Tilly replied. "We can start him on a diuretic to reduce fluid buildup and a heart medication to improve function. It won't reverse the condition, but it can slow progression and make him more comfortable. You're looking at months, maybe more, if he responds well." Emily stared at Bailey, who looked back at her with tired eyes, but still managed a small wag of his tail. Her throat burned. "I want to start now," she said. Dr. Tilly nodded. "I'll get the meds ready. We'll show you how to administer them at home." As the vet stepped out, a small figure peeked into the doorway. A boy of about 8, with tousled blonde hair and big wire-rimmed glasses, stepped in, holding a frayed blue rope toy. His face lit up when he saw Emily. "Miss Carson?" he asked. Emily blinked, stunned. Kyle nodded. "Mom said we could come by today. Charlie has an ear infection." He pointed behind him, where a tired woman in scrubs waited near the door with a Shih Tzu tucked under one arm. Emily smiled faintly. "It's my wedding day," she said, gesturing to her dress. "I know," Kyle beamed. "You look like a princess." "Is that your dog?" "Yes," Emily said softly. "His name is Bailey." Kyle knelt beside the golden retriever, his skinny knees poking out from ripped jeans. "He looks sad," he said. "He's just tired today." Kyle held out the rope toy. "Charlie doesn't play with this anymore. Bailey can have it." Emily felt her chest tighten. "That's very kind of you." Kyle nodded solemnly. "My dad says sometimes dogs help people through hard stuff, like superpowers." Bailey reached out with his nose touching the rope toy. Emily saw the corners of Rachel's eyes shimmer. After Kyle and his mother left, Dr. Tilly returned with a small kit, 2 prescription bottles, and a handwritten dosage chart. "We'll start the diuretic today and monitor him over the next 72 hours. You can take him home tonight, but call me if his breathing worsens." Emily crouched again beside Bailey. "We're going home, buddy. We're going to make this work." Rachel leaned on the counter, arms crossed, voice soft. "You sure about this?" Emily nodded. "When I adopted him, I promised he'd never be alone. Not when it mattered." Rachel handed her the new prescriptions, and Emily tucked them carefully into the folds of her wedding dress. Bailey stood shakily, one paw lifting for balance before he eased back down. But he still stood. On the way out, Emily paused at the receptionist desk, where Tasha was now wiping her eyes discreetly. "Thank you," Emily said simply. "Take care of him," Tasha said. "He's special." Outside, the sky had shifted to soft gold. Emily and Rachel helped Bailey into the car, the rope toy clutched gently in his jaws. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But they had today, and that for now was enough. The sun had begun its descent toward the Charleston horizon, spilling honeyed light across the asphalt outside the veterinary clinic. Through the wide glass doors of the Charleston Veterinary Center, the mood inside the lobby had shifted from clinical and urgent to quietly reverent. The front desk was now cleared of patient files and brochures, replaced by a makeshift arrangement of white flowers someone had brought in from a canceled wedding altar. The IV stand that had administered Bailey's first round of medication now stood beside a chair draped in lace. Emily sat on the floor in her crumpled wedding gown, legs tucked beneath her, her back against the wall, and Bailey's head resting gently on her lap. He was no longer panting, though his breath was slow, steady and shallow. The blue rope toy from Kyle lay beside him, and someone, perhaps Tasha, had added a small plush ring-bearer pillow just behind his front paws. The front door opened with a soft chime. Jack Monroe stepped inside, still dressed in his navy three-piece suit. His dark hair was slightly windblown from the drive, and his tie hung slightly loosened, as though he had stopped caring about perfection somewhere between the church and here. He was tall, with broad shoulders and kind hazel eyes, and at this moment his gaze was fixed only on Emily. Emily looked up and looked up. Her voice cracked from emotion. "You came." Jack crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her. "You think I'd miss our wedding day?" She opened her mouth to protest about the venue, the dress, the absence of guests, but he simply took her hand. "You look beautiful," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Bailey chose this place. That makes it sacred." At that moment, Rachel entered from the hallway, wearing a borrowed cream blouse over her jeans and holding a single white rose. "I texted the minister," she said. "He's 10 minutes away. Said he'd come in his robes if we didn't mind the smell of dog shampoo." Emily laughed for the first time that day, soft and surprised. Rachel walked over and placed the rose in a mason jar beside the chair that would serve as the altar. Then she crouched down beside Bailey and smoothed his ears. "I guess I'm maid of honor now," she said, smiling. "Still think I should have worn heels, Dr. Madeline Tilley, the gray-haired vet with the steady hand, stepped into the room holding a clipboard and a confused expression. "You're having a wedding?" she asked. Jack stood and straightened his suit jacket. "Yes, ma'am. And if you're willing, we'd be honored to have you stay." Dr. Tilley's eyes softened. "I've seen countless goodbyes in these walls. It would be nice to witness a beginning." As she walked to the back to notify her team, another figure appeared in the doorway. Dr. Allen, the clinic's senior vet. A stoic man in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown that masked a deep well of compassion. He wore a gray coat and horn-rimmed glasses and carried a clipboard under one arm. Dr. Tilley introduced them. "This is Dr. Allen. He's been here for 30 years. Jack extended his hand, which Dr. Allen took with a curt nod. "I've married hundreds," Jack said, "but only once like this, doctor." Allen glanced at Bailey, who lifted his head at the sound of Emily's voice. "He's strong," the doctor said, "maybe too strong for his own good." The door opened again, and Reverend Miles Kavanaugh walked in, adjusting the collar of his white robe. He was in his late 40s, a tall, lanky man with a wide forehead and a gentle, almost boyish smile. He had a calming presence, the kind that made people feel safe at funerals and hopeful at weddings. He clapped his hands softly together. "Well," he said, "I've married people in backyards, boats, and once on a hot air balloon, but never next to an IV stand." The small group laughed. As they prepared the ceremony, Tasha dimmed the lights and someone lit 3 tea candles they'd found in the emergency drawer. Jack stood at the front, hands clasped. Emily, still barefoot, was walked down the short aisle between reception chairs by Rachel, who wiped her own eyes as they passed. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Kavanaugh began, "we are gathered here, not in a grand cathedral, but in a place where healing happens, a place of compassion, resilience, and devotion." Emily and Jack faced each other, the worn floor beneath them, Bailey between them. "Marriage," the Reverend continued, "is not made holy by where it happens, but by the love it contains. And today, you have chosen to begin your journey, surrounded not by chandeliers and silk, but by the presence of a friend who has shown you what it means to love without condition. He looked at Bailey and smiled. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring. I had a big speech planned, he said. But now, all I want to say is thank you for choosing to be here, for loving Bailey as much as I do, and for making this the most meaningful day of my life. Emily wiped a tear. You always said you admired my heart, she whispered. But you were the one who told me that love means showing up no matter where, no matter what. And I'm here because of you, because of him. Rachel handed them the rings. By the power vested in me, Reverend Kavanaugh said, and by the spirit of love that fills this room, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jack leaned down and kissed Emily, careful not to press into Bailey's side. At that exact moment, Bailey lifted his head, gave a low, soft bark, one of approval, and then let it rest again between his paws. Applause broke out soft and joyful. Dr. Allen stood, in the back arms folded, and spoke for the first time. In all my years, I have seen love carry people through surgeries, through loss, through miracles. But I've never seen a wedding like this. You're lucky, both of you. Emily nodded. We know. The first days of married life for Emily and Jack were far from ordinary. There was no honeymoon flight to Greece, no villa overlooking sapphire seas. Instead, there were morning pill schedules taped to the fridge, soft steps across the hardwood floor, so as not to wake the sleeping dog, and quiet evenings spent curled on the couch, with Bailey nestled between them, like the heart of their little world. It had been 3 weeks since their wedding at the veterinary clinic, and each day had taken on a new rhythm, gentler, slower, wrapped in gratitude. Emily had returned her gown to its storage box, still marked with faint paw prints and the smell of antiseptic, and tucked it away in the linen closet next to Bailey's first collar. She had chosen to keep the imperfections. They were part of the story now. Every morning she woke before Jack, the sunlight just beginning to spill through the gauzy white curtains. She'd find Bailey, already awake, lying beside their bed, his soft golden coat rising and falling in steady breaths. She would run her fingers along his back and whisper, "Good morning, Miracle," and he would wag his tail faintly in reply. Jack Monroe, once a man with a rigid morning routine and a precision-driven engineering mindset, had softened too. He no longer set his alarm. He no longer fretted about perfectly pressed suits or spilled coffee. He brewed their favorite blend in the kitchen, half decaf, half hazelnut, and brought it upstairs in mismatched mugs. He'd sit on the floor beside Bailey and share scraps of toast while discussing mundane things like whether the state of the driveway or the next vet appointment. One breezy afternoon, they drove to Hampton Park, a lush, sprawling green in Charleston's Upper Peninsula. The azaleas were blooming in bursts of pink and coral, and a pond near the center reflected the wide Carolina sky. Bailey shuffled slowly between them, leash gently looped around Emily's wrist, his nose twitching at every passing scent. Children raced past with kites, and couples sat on picnic blankets. But Emily and Jack moved at a pace dictated by Bailey, unhurried, deliberate. They stopped beneath an old live oak with sweeping branches that nearly touched the ground. Jack spread out a blanket, and Emily sat with Bailey's head in her lap. Jack pulled out a small leather notebook, their Bailey journal, and began writing. "What are you jotting down now?" Emily asked, smiling. "Day 12, Jack said. Walked 80 feet. chased a squirrel for 3 seconds, looked proud of himself for 20 minutes. Emily laughed and leaned down to kiss Bailey's head. He's the bravest old man I know. Later that evening, Rachel arrived with a bottle of sparkling apple cider and 2 reusable food containers from a new vegan place downtown. She'd been different lately, more grounded. There was less bite in her jokes, more pause in her steps. Her curls were pinned loosely, and she wore a navy polo with a small embroidered paw print that read Charleston Paws Rescue. "I got the job," she announced, dropping the containers on the kitchen counter. Emily's eyes lit up. "You did." "Volunteer coordinator," Rachel said, popping the cap off the bottle. "Mostly, I make sure the teenagers don't feed donuts to the chihuahuas. But it's a start." Jack raised his glass to meaningful chaos. Rachel's relationship with Emily had undergone a quiet mending since the wedding. It wasn't immediate or dramatic, just small exchanges over morning coffee, shared laughter while Bailey snored at their feet, and now long conversations about animals, people, and purpose. Rachel had begun accompanying Emily to the vet every Tuesday, and there they often saw a familiar face, Kyle. The little boy now visited regularly with his mother, Danielle, a 35-year-old nurse with tired eyes, dark curls and a bun, and a gentle smile that rarely wavered. Danielle had been bringing their dog Charlie for allergy shots, and more often than not, Kyle insisted they stop in to check on Bailey. One afternoon, Kyle arrived with a handmade card drawn in crayon. A picture of Bailey with a superhero cape captioned Captain Bailey Hero Dog. Inside, he had written, "Thank you for protecting Miss Carson." Emily blinked back tears and pinned the card above the fireplace. Rachel had taken a shine to Kyle as well. She would bring him dog-safe treats to give Bailey. And once when Danielle was stuck on a shift, she sat with Kyle in the waiting room, teaching him how to fold paper into dog-shaped origami. "I think he's going to grow up to be a vet," Rachel whispered once to Emily. "He's got that quiet kindness." Emily nodded. "Like someone else I know." Bailey had good days and slower days. Some mornings, he chased the shadows of birds in the backyard. Other times, he didn't leave his bed except for meals. But he was never alone. Emily and Jack took turns staying home when he seemed too tired working remotely from their dining room table. One weekend, Jack canceled a client call to build Bailey a ramp from the porch to the garden. Rachel painted it teal and added a little sign Bailey's runway. Emily began photographing Bailey every day, not posed just as he was, sleeping in a sunbeam, sharing peanut butter with Jack, sitting beside Kyle with his paw on the boy's sneaker. The album on her phone became its own kind of memory vault. "Every day is a gift," she told Jack one night, as they lay in bed, Bailey nestled between them. "I never understood what that meant until now." Jack stroked Bailey's ears. He gave us perspective and time, the most sacred kind. And so life continued, not with grandeur or perfection, but with grace, with whispered mornings and slow walks, with the love of a dog who had once blocked the church doors and in doing so opened a path they hadn't expected, but now wouldn't trade for anything. The first true sign came on a Thursday morning in late April. The air in Charleston had shifted a softness in the wind, the scent of jasmine returning to the breeze. Emily woke before dawn, sensing something in the room was different. Bailey lay beside the bed as always, his breathing slow but steady, his eyes open but far away. He hadn't stirred when Jack rose to make coffee or when the front porch creaked beneath the paper boy's footsteps. He simply watched the world quiet and still. Emily knelt beside him, gently touching his shoulder. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispered. Bailey's tail flicked once in response, but he made no move to rise. By noon, it became clear Bailey hadn't eaten all day. Even peanut butter, his favorite, went untouched. Emily sat with him on the porch, the light casting soft shadows through the latticework, and stroked his coat, now thinner in places. When Jack returned from the hardware store with mulch for the flower beds, he found her sitting there, teacup untouched, eyes red. "He's tired," she said simply. Jack didn't respond. He crouched down, pressed his forehead to Bailey's, and closed his eyes. Later that day, Dr. Tilly visited the house. She examined Bailey with practiced gentleness and a visible ache behind her composed demeanor. "His heart is slowing," she told them. "There's nothing more we can do but make him comfortable." Rachel arrived shortly after, holding her camera by the strap. She wore a pale blue sundress and sandals, her curly hair pinned back from her face. When she saw Bailey lying in the sun by the porch, she froze for a moment, then came forward and sat beside him, placing the camera in her lap. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we could take him out. One last walk, just the three of you. Hampton Park?" Emily nodded slowly. "I don't know if he can manage." "We'll carry him," Jack said. So they prepared. Jack gently placed a folded towel in the back seat. Emily gathered Bailey's rope toy, now faded and frayed. Rachel filled a thermos with cool water and tucked a soft fleece blanket into a bag. When Kyle and his mother Danielle arrived by surprise, Emily greeted them with a sad smile. "I thought he might like to see you," Danielle said softly. Kyle was holding the same blue rope toy he'd first given Bailey months ago, the colors brighter than the faded one in Emily's hand. "He should have this," Kyle said, and handed it over. The first one was just a loan. Emily hugged him tightly, whispering a soft thank you into his hair. At Hampton Park, the sun was beginning its descent. The sky turned golden, streaked with the faintest pink. A light breeze whispered through the trees. Jack carried Bailey in his arms, wrapped in the blanket, while Emily walked beside them, her hand resting on Bailey's head. Rachel followed quietly with her camera. They stopped beneath the same live oak tree where they had picnicked weeks before. Jack lowered Bailey gently to the ground, arranging the blanket, so he lay in the dappled sunlight. Emily knelt beside him, placing both toys, the new rope and the old one, on either side. Bailey lifted his head once and let out a small, raspy exhale, eyes searching the faces around him. Jack sat cross-legged on one side. "We'll stay here as long as you want." Rachel, crouched nearby, lifted her camera and with a soft click captured the three of them beneath the canopy of gold. Bailey's breaths were shallower now. Emily leaned close, cradling his head in her lap. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "You've been the best friend I could ever ask for," she whispered. "You carried me when I couldn't carry myself. You loved me even when I forgot how to love myself. You led me to Jack. You made me believe in family again. Thank you, Bailey, for everything." Bailey's eyes fluttered once, and he let out one long breath. His body settled still and weightless. Silence. Then a breeze stirred the leaves above them. Jack placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Rachel lowered her camera. No one spoke. As twilight settled over the park, they sat together for a long time, letting grief come quietly, gently. On the drive home, no one played music. Jack held Emily's hand the whole way. Rachel stared out the window, her fingers still wrapped around the camera strap. In the back seat, Bailey's blanket remained tucked around him, his rope toys placed carefully by his side. When they reached the house, Jack lifted him once more, this time carrying him to the backyard beneath the dogwood tree where they had decided he would rest. There, with soft words and trembling hands, they said goodbye again. Rachel placed the printed photo she had taken earlier inside a frame and set it on the mantel beside Bailey's collar. That night, Emily sat on the living room floor with the photo in her lap. The soft glow of the lamp cast warm light across the hardwood. Jack sat beside her. The house was quiet, but not empty. She looked at the picture Bailey nestled in the grass, Jack and Emily on either side, arms around him, their faces pressed close, smiling through the sadness. "He gave us everything," she said. Jack nodded. "And we gave him a life full of love." Rachel walked in with 2 mugs of tea, one for each of them. She set hers on the coffee table and pulled from her pocket something small, a silver tag engraved with Bailey's name and the words, "Always beside you." She handed it to Emily, who pressed it to her chest. Then came a soft knock at the door. Danielle and Kyle stood on the porch, the boy holding a small pot of forget-me-nots. "For Bailey," Kyle said. "So he's never forgotten." Spring returned to Charleston with its signature fanfare, thick clusters of wisteria curling around porch railings, the scent of fresh-cut grass rising from the sidewalks, and the low hum of cicadas beginning to stir beneath the soil. A year had passed since Bailey's final walk, and though his absence lingered like a whisper in the corners of the Carson home, something else had also begun to blossom space, not for forgetting, but for welcoming. Emily Carson stood once again at the entrance of the Charleston Humane Society, the same shelter where she'd first met Bailey. She was older now, the faintest lines at the corners of her eyes no longer a mark of worry, but of all the moments she'd held on to. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose braid, and she wore a soft ivory cardigan over jeans, one hand nervously clutching a manila envelope filled with adoption forms. Beside her, Jack stood tall in his usual button-down and rolled sleeves, calm and steady as always. He carried 2 thermoses, one for coffee, one filled with homemade chicken broth just in case. "Are you sure about this?" he asked gently. Emily looked up at him, her smile small but certain. "We're not replacing Bailey," she said. "We're continuing what he taught us. There's more love to give." Inside the shelter buzzed with quiet activity. Volunteers moved between kennels with bowls and leashes. The air smelled faintly of detergent and damp fur. Behind the front desk sat Marcia, a round woman in her early 60s with short silver hair and thick glasses. She had a kind, no-nonsense air about her and greeted them with a warm nod. "Back for another miracle?" she asked. Emily smiled. "That's the hope." Marcia led them through the back hallway to the senior dog wing, where fewer visitors wandered. "Most people walk right past the old ones," she said, sighing. "Everyone wants puppies, but there's something about an older dog. They see you right from the start." At the very last kennel, a large golden retriever lay curled on a worn fleece blanket. His coat was faded with gray around the muzzle, and his eyes held a steady, quiet sadness. A small sign on the bars read, "Duke, age 9, owner surrendered due to relocation." "He came in 3 months ago," Marcia said. Family moved into assisted living. Broke their hearts, but rules were rules. He hasn't barked once since he arrived. Jack crouched low, fingers sliding through the bars. Duke raised his head slowly and stepped forward, pressing his nose to Jack's hand. Emily knelt beside her husband. "Hey there," she whispered. "You've been waiting, haven't you?" Duke's tail thumped just once, but it was enough. By late afternoon, Duke was home. Rachel arrived just as they were helping him out of the car. She wore a green utility jacket and jeans stained with ink smudges. Since Bailey's passing, she'd started a personal blog, Dogs Who Saved Us, where she told stories of real-life rescues, both the canine kind and the human ones. Her readership had grown quickly. Shelters reached out. Readers sent letters. For the first time in years, she felt like her words had a place. She crouched down to greet Duke. "You're a big boy," she said softly, rubbing his ears. "You're gonna like it here." Inside, Duke explored slowly, his steps cautious. When he reached the living room, he paused in front of the fireplace. There on the mantel sat Bailey's collar beside a framed photo of the wedding in the clinic. Duke sniffed, then turned, circling the rug once before settling right in the same spot Bailey had always claimed. Emily's breath caught. He knew. That night, as they ate dinner on the couch, Duke at their feet, Jack placed the old blue rope toy retrieved from its keepsake box beside Duke. The dog leaned down, gave it a curious lick, then rested his head next to it, as if guarding something precious. A few weeks later, Emily and Jack visited Kyle's elementary school for Career Day. Emily had been invited as a teacher alum to speak about compassion and literacy in early childhood education. Kyle had written a special essay for the event titled "The Dog Who Was a Hero." Danielle met them at the gates. She wore scrubs under her jacket and had a weary but proud smile on her face. Kyle came running out his backpack, bouncing, clutching something behind his back. "Is that Duke?" he asked excitedly. Jack gave a little nod. "Sure is. Want to meet him?" Kyle stepped forward slowly, crouching down to Duke's level. The dog tilted his head, then pressed his snout gently into the boy's hand. "I made him something," Kyle said, pulling out a small braided rope toy with a tag that read, "For Duke Love Kyle." Emily felt her eyes sting. "Thank you," she said. "He'll treasure it." Kyle beamed. He's part of the story now, too. Back at home, Rachel uploaded her latest blog post, "From Bailey to Duke, the Love That Lingers." She included a photo of Duke lying beside the fireplace, eyes closed, Bailey's collar hanging just above him. She wrote about healing and about how love didn't end when a heartbeat stopped. It simply found another home. Emily stood by the window that night, watching Duke snore softly on the rug. The air was warm, the garden full of buzzing moths. Jack came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "I miss him," she whispered. "I do too. But I think she said Bailey sent us Duke. He knew our hearts had more to give." Jack kissed her temple. "And Duke's already giving it back." Outside, the stars blinked into view, silent and steady. Inside, the house was full of warmth again, not just from memory, but from life. Sometimes, love doesn't come wrapped in perfection. It limps into our lives a little older, a little quieter, but carrying the weight of 1,000 silent prayers. Bailey didn't just lead Emily down the aisle. He led her toward something deeper. The kind of love that sacrifices, that stays, that whispers, "I'm here even when words fail." And when his time ended, God sent another guardian duke not to replace, but to remind. This story is not just about a dog. It is about how God works through the quietest moments. A dog lying across a doorway, a child offering a toy, a sister choosing to stay. These are the miracles we often miss, the everyday graces that guide us back to what matters most. Bailey's love didn't die. It transformed. And perhaps that is God's greatest miracle of all love that continues even through loss. Love that finds another place to live. So if you have ever felt the touch of unconditional love, if you have ever seen God's hand in the fur of a loyal friend or the kindness of a stranger, then this story is for you. Share this story with someone who still believes in goodness. Comment Amen if you believe that dogs are angels in disguise. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories where faith, love, and animals show us the way home. And may God bless you and your loved ones always.